the American dream. For more than a century, it has been whispered to us like a sacred promise that if you work hard, play by the rules, and keep moving forward, you will one day arrive at the life you deserve. A house of your own, financial security, dignity in your work, freedom for your family, and the satisfaction of knowing you made it. But somewhere along the way, the dream became a deception. Many today feel like they are running on a treadmill that never stops, chasing an ever-moving horizon. They labor longer hours, yet feel less free. They earn more money, yet live with more debt. They accumulate possessions, yet feel emptier inside. The promise was that hard work would lead to liberation, but for millions, it has only produced a subtler form of slavery. This paradox is not new. Over a century ago, Friedrich Nietzsche warned of societies that domesticate the human spirit, promising security, while quietly breeding conformity. He believed that beneath the glittering ideals of progress often lurks a hidden machinery of control. And centuries earlier, Niccolò Machiavelli, the sharp-eyed analyst of power, revealed how rulers maintain obedience not only by force, but by shaping the very dreams of their people. What if the American dream has become precisely this? Not a vision of freedom, but a tool of governance. This is the question we will explore together. In this journey, I want to speak to you not as an outsider criticizing a culture, but as a fellow traveler who feels the weight of these questions in my own life. For what is at stake here is not just economics or politics. It is your soul, your sense of meaning, and your ability to live authentically in a world that trains you to live for appearances. In the chapters ahead, we will unravel 6 insights, drawn from philosophy, psychology, and lived experience, to reveal how the dream deceives us and how you might awaken from it. Picture a factory in the early 20th century. A long line of men and women stand at their stations, repeating the same motion hundreds of times a day. Their pay is meager, the hours long, but the message surrounding them is clear. Hard work is sacred. Posters on the walls praise diligence. Politicians promise dignity through labor. Priests remind them that idleness is sin. Now, fast forward to today. The factory line may have been replaced by the glowing screen of a laptop, the constant ping of emails, and the endless cycle of meetings, but the message remains the same. Your worth is tied to how much you produce. Productivity has become not just an economic measure, but a spiritual one. This transformation was studied in depth by Max Weber, the German sociologist who coined the idea of the Protestant work ethic. He showed how Western society, under the influence of Protestant religion, transformed labor into a moral calling. Work was no longer just a necessity to survive. It became a sacred duty, a sign of virtue. Even after religion loosened its grip, this ethic remained embedded in the culture. In America especially, to work hard is not just to earn money, it is to prove your moral worth. But Nietzsche saw the danger. He warned that when work becomes worship, it drains the vitality of the human spirit. Instead of creating, exploring, or cultivating joy, we become slaves to busyness. He called this the life of the last man, the figure who clings to comfort, security, and routine. Mistaking them for meaning, the last man no longer strives to transcend himself, but instead worships small routines, filling time with endless tasks. Think of how many conversations today revolve around exhaustion. I'm so busy, we confess, as if busyness itself were a badge of honor. The culture silently applauds this confession because it keeps us compliant, predictable, and endlessly striving. But beneath it is a hidden tragedy. In sanctifying work, we have forgotten why we work at all. Here, Machiavelli's shadow also returns. A wise ruler knows that the most controllable citizens are not the lazy, but the industrious, those who police themselves with guilt if they are unproductive. In such a society, no chains are needed. People keep themselves chained, believing their labor is the very condition of their dignity. But pause here. Ask yourself, when did you last rest without guilt? When did you last give yourself permission to do nothing, not as laziness, but as an affirmation that you are more than your labor? If this question feels uncomfortable, it may reveal just how deeply the ethic of productivity has lodged itself into your soul. The danger of worshipping work is that we become alienated not only from our families, our communities, and our creativity, but from ourselves. The modern worker may be wealthier than their ancestors, but often feels poorer in time, in joy, and in freedom. We are told that rest is a reward for labor, but what if rest, reflection, and play are the very conditions that make life worth living? To awaken here is not to reject work entirely, but to reclaim it. Work can be meaningful when it serves life, but destructive when life serves work. The question, then, is whether you labor for the sake of your spirit or sacrifice your spirit for the sake of labor. And so we close this second insight with a challenge. If your work has become your worship, what would it mean to place life itself back on the altar? Imagine standing in a vast shopping mall. Music plays softly from overhead speakers, perfumes drift from glass storefronts, and mannequins dressed in perfect clothing stare back with frozen smiles. Every corner promises a better version of you, shinier, more beautiful, more successful. For a moment, the air itself seems charged with possibility. Yet when you leave with shopping bags in hand, the thrill fades quickly, and the hunger quietly returns. This is the cycle of desire in modern life. Anticipation, satisfaction, emptiness, and then another desire. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer saw this pattern long before the age of advertising. He argued that human life is governed not by reason but by will, a blind, insatiable striving that never rests. For Schopenhauer, happiness is always fleeting, because the moment one desire is satisfied, another immediately takes its place. Life becomes a pendulum swinging endlessly between longing and boredom. Consumer culture has weaponized this insight. Corporations know that if they can keep you dissatisfied, they can keep you buying. Every advertisement whispers the same message: you are not enough yet. But you could be if only you had this. Happiness is never here. In this moment, it is always just one purchase away. Psychology confirms what Schopenhauer intuited. Studies on hedonic adaptation show that whether you win the lottery or buy a new phone, the emotional high fades rapidly, and you soon return to your baseline state of desire. This is not accidental. It is structural. A society driven by consumption requires its citizens to remain perpetually unsatisfied. Nietzsche called this the culture of decadence, a society so focused on superficial pleasures and manufactured desires that it forgets the deeper joy of creation and vitality. Instead of cultivating inner strength, we chase external symbols. Instead of learning how to live, we endlessly upgrade our possessions. Think about your own life. How often have you believed, once I achieve this, then I'll finally be happy? Perhaps it was a degree, a job, a partner, or a home. And perhaps once you achieved it, you felt the glow for a while before it faded, leaving you hungry again. This is the cruel deception. The American dream promises lasting happiness, but what it delivers is an economy of endless appetite. And in that cycle, you are not free. You are a customer. But what is the alternative? Schopenhauer offered one possibility: the cultivation of stillness, beauty, and compassion. For him, art and music were moments when the restless will was quieted, when we stepped outside the cycle of craving and simply were. Nietzsche pushed further. He believed that true happiness is not found in consuming, but in creating, in affirming life with all its struggles, and transforming suffering into meaning. You and I cannot escape desire completely. It is part of being human, but we can begin to see through its disguises. We can notice when happiness is promised, but never delivered. And in that awareness, something subtle shifts. Instead of being pulled endlessly outward, we begin to turn inward, asking what forms of joy are not for sale. So the third insight leaves us with a haunting question. If desire is endless, how will you choose which desires to honor and which to let go? There is a story told about a prisoner who spent decades behind bars. When the gates were finally opened and freedom was his, he hesitated. The world beyond the prison walls was uncertain, unpredictable, even frightening. Inside, though captive, his days had been ordered, his meals provided, his role clear. After a long silence, he turned away from freedom and walked back into his cell. This is the risk we face when we awaken to the deception of the American dream. Once you see that the dream was designed for you, that work became worship, that desire is endless, that security can enslave, and that the self you are chasing is not your own, you may feel disoriented. The old prison is gone, but the world outside seems vast and uncertain. And in that moment, the temptation to return to the safety of the old dream is very strong. Nietzsche understood this moment as the crucible of transformation. He believed that once the old values collapse, the values of conformity, obedience, and borrowed identities, the individual must not fall into despair or nihilism. Instead, they must create new values, their own values. This was his vision of the Übermensch, not a figure of domination, but of creation. The one who refuses to live by hand-me-down meanings, and instead dares to write their own story. Albert Camus, facing the absurdity of life in a world without guaranteed meaning, offered a parallel insight. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he describes the condemned man endlessly pushing his boulder up the hill, only to watch it roll down again. For Camus, the question is not whether life is absurd, but how we respond to that absurdity. Do we collapse under its weight? Or do we, like Sisyphus, embrace the struggle itself, finding freedom in defiance, joy in the act of living, even without final guarantees? To awaken, then, is not merely to reject the American dream. It is to step into the terrifying, exhilarating task of creating your own dream. This is harder than it sounds. It means asking questions without ready-made answers. What does success mean to me? What kind of work nourishes my soul? What kind of love allows me to flourish? What kind of life would I live if no one else could judge me? Most people will never face these questions directly. It is easier to inherit a script than to write one. It is easier to chase endless desires than to discover authentic ones. It is easier to stay in the safety of the herd than to risk standing alone. But to awaken is to accept this risk, because only there, in the creation of your own dream, does life regain its intensity, its freedom, its joy. Look around at history's great figures. Socrates refusing to betray his search for truth, even unto death. Kierkegaard embracing faith against ridicule. Nietzsche writing against the values of his age, even as it cost him his health and sanity. These were not men who lived someone else's dream. They bore the weight of creating their own. And so can you. Pause, breathe, And imagine if tomorrow you were free from the demands of the old dream. No obligations to status, no fear of judgment, no need to conform. What kind of life would you begin to build? The sixth and final insight invites you into this act of courage. To awaken is not simply to see the deception, it is to declare, with your whole being, I will not live a dream that was handed to me. I will create one that is my own. Let me tell you a quiet story. A young woman graduates from university with honors. Her parents beam with pride, her professors congratulate her, and her friends envy her new corporate job. From the outside, she is living the dream, but inside she feels a subtle hollowness. The life unfolding before her seems strangely disconnected from the person she feels herself to be. When she looks in the mirror, she wonders, who is this life actually for? This is the haunting question that modern society rarely allows us to ask. From the beginning, we are handed templates for identity. The successful student, the respectable professional, the responsible parent. These identities are applauded by culture, rewarded by institutions, and reinforced by peers. They seem to promise belonging and worth. Yet many discover, often late in life, that they have become strangers to themselves, successful in the eyes of the world, but empty in their own. Carl Jung called this the tragedy of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of society. The persona is not inherently false. We all need roles to function in the world. But when the mask hardens and we mistake it for our true self, the deeper parts of our being, the unconscious, the creative, the spiritual, are ignored. Jung warned that the neglected self does not disappear. It returns as anxiety, depression, or a vague sense of alienation, whispering, "This is not who you are." Kierkegaard, centuries before Jung, described the same problem in existential terms. He believed that the greatest despair was not to fail in the eyes of others, but to succeed at becoming someone you never truly wanted to be. For Kierkegaard, authenticity meant daring to stand before God or before existence itself, without the borrowed masks of society. To live otherwise was to die slowly in the comfort of approval. Here, the American dream reveals its cruelest deception. It does not merely sell you possessions, it sells you an identity. It tells you who you should be, what success should look like, and what path you must follow. And because the dream is celebrated everywhere, in movies, in families, in politics, it feels almost impossible to resist. Yet resistance is the very mark of authenticity. Think of the lives quietly broken by this deception. The artist who buried their passion to pursue a respectable career, the parent who secretly regrets a path chosen under pressure, the retiree who looks back and wonders, whose life did I live? These are not failures of ambition, but failures of authenticity. They are tragedies of the self. And so we must ask, how do we return to ourselves? Jung suggested that the path lies in individuation, the lifelong process of integrating the unconscious, listening to dreams, confronting the shadow, and reclaiming the parts of the self society told us to hide. Kierkegaard insisted it requires a leap, a decision to live truthfully, even at the cost of approval. Both thinkers agree. Authenticity requires courage. Pause for a moment. Strip away the voices of parents, peers, and culture. If no one were watching, if no one could judge, what life would you choose to live? That question is the beginning of freedom. The fifth insight, then, is a warning and an invitation. The self you are chasing may not be your own, but beneath the layers of expectation, the real self still waits, quiet, patient, and longing to be heard. And so we end with a piercing question. Will you continue living the life others chose for you, or will you dare to reclaim the one that is truly yours? Picture a crowded airport terminal. Hundreds of travelers shuffle through long lines, shoes removed, belongings scanned, bodies patted down, cameras watch from every corner. Announcements remind everyone of the rules. Most comply without complaint, even thank the system for keeping them safe. Yet beneath this sense of order lies a quiet paradox. To be safe, we must first surrender freedom. This trade is not unique to airports. It is woven into the very structure of modern life. We accept long work hours in exchange for financial security. We accept constant surveillance in exchange for national security. We accept debt in exchange for the dream of stability. Again and again, freedom is bargained away in the name of safety. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes argued that this was the foundation of civilization itself. In his famous work Leviathan, Hobbes imagined the state of nature, a world without rules, as a place of fear and violence, where life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. To escape this chaos, people willingly surrendered their freedoms to a sovereign power, trading liberty for protection. Civilization, then, was born out of fear. And yet, centuries later, Michel Foucault revealed how this trade evolves. In modern societies, control no longer needs to be brutally enforced. It is subtle, invisible, and internalized. He described the panopticon, a prison design, in which inmates never know if they are being watched, so they regulate themselves as if they always are. Today, the panopticon is no longer a prison tower. It is the glowing rectangle in your pocket, the workplace surveillance software, the endless metrics that measure your performance. We obey not because chains bind us, but because fear whispers to us that obedience will keep us safe. The American dream was sold as a promise of freedom, yet in practice, it often demands conformity. To make it, you must take on mortgages, car loans, and student debt. You must submit to corporate hierarchies, workplace monitoring, and endless performance reviews. You must follow the rules of the system, not because they liberate you, but because they secure you with just enough comfort to keep you from revolting. Nietzsche would call this the psychology of the herd. Out of fear, most people choose security. Even if it means shrinking their lives, they obey silently, convincing themselves that safety is the highest good. But Nietzsche urges us to ask, is it better to live safely in chains or dangerously in freedom? Of course, the danger here is not just theoretical. If you abandon security, you may lose stability, relationships, or comfort. Yet if you cling to security at all costs, you risk losing your soul. Think of the countless people who stay in jobs they despise, marriages that suffocate them, or belief systems that no longer make sense, all for the illusion of safety. What is exchanged in each case is not just freedom, but the possibility of becoming fully alive. Pause here and ask yourself, where have you traded freedom for security? Was the bargain worth it? Are you living or merely surviving? The fourth insight is not a call to reckless abandon, but to conscious choice. Security is not evil in itself. We all need shelter, stability, and safety. But when security becomes the highest good, it slowly kills the very freedom that makes life worth living. So this insight leaves us with a choice. Do you want the comfort of a cage or the risk of flight? Let me take you to a quiet evening in a suburban home. A man, exhausted from a 12-hour workday, collapses into his couch. His children are already asleep. His dinner is cold. He stares at the television where advertisements flicker with images of luxury cars, smiling families, and perfect homes. For a moment he feels both hope and despair. Hope that one day this life might be his, and despair that despite decades of effort, he is still reaching for it. He does not ask himself the obvious question, who planted this dream in me in the first place? This is where we must begin. Because the American dream is not something you invented. It was handed to you, whispered in your ears by schools, movies, politicians, and corporations before you could even speak for yourself. From childhood, you were trained to believe that your worth would be measured by career success, home ownership, and social status. You were told that hard work inevitably leads to prosperity, and that if you fail to achieve it, the fault is your own. Here, Niccolò Machiavelli's ruthless clarity becomes essential. In The Prince, Machiavelli explains that a wise ruler does not simply use force to govern. Force breeds resentment. Instead, the most effective rulers create illusions that keep people willingly obedient. They offer the promise of security, prosperity, or glory, and the people, believing in this vision, chain themselves more effectively than any army could. The most powerful prison is not made of stone, but of dreams. The American dream, seen through Machiavelli's eyes, functions in precisely this way. It is a political technology, a story designed to keep generations striving within the boundaries of an economic system. When millions of citizens chase the same dream of upward mobility, they do not question the structure that makes it unattainable for most. They compete with each other instead of questioning the game itself. They labor harder, consume more, and internalize the belief that if they suffer, it must be due to their own shortcomings, not because the system was never designed to let everyone win. Nietzsche would call this the morality of the herd. He warns that societies pacify the human spirit by giving us pre-packaged values, telling us what counts as success, virtue, and respectability. The danger, he believed, was that most people would never even realize they were living someone else's script. They would toil for symbols, money, titles, houses, mistaking them for freedom, when in fact they were signs of deeper captivity. The tragedy of the man on the couch is not just that he is tired, it is that his very sense of self has been colonized by someone else's dream. He believes he is chasing freedom, but he is really living inside a cage designed for him, a cage so effective that he calls it aspiration. Pause for a moment and consider your own life. How many of your deepest ambitions are truly yours? Did you choose them freely, or were they given to you by parents, media, or culture? Do you want the house, the car, the promotion because they resonate with your soul, or because they are the standard signs of success others expect you to achieve? The first awakening is always unsettling. To realize that the dream you've been chasing was never yours is to feel a kind of loss, even betrayal. But it is also the beginning of freedom, for if the dream was designed for you, then you can begin to design something different, something truer, something that cannot be sold to you in commercials or defined by society's applause. And so the first insight leaves us with a question. If the dream you inherited was never yours, what would it mean to begin crafting your own? We began with the image of the tired man on his couch, staring at a television filled with glittering promises. His tragedy was not that he was lazy, but that he never questioned the origin of his dream. And perhaps now, you too are asking, whose dream have I been chasing? The American dream was supposed to be a promise that through hard work and perseverance, every individual could rise, prosper, and live in freedom. But as we have seen, the dream has often become a deception, a story designed to shape our desires, discipline our labor, and keep us obedient to a system that feeds on our endless striving. Together, we have traced 6 insights through the voices of philosophy and psychology. First, Machiavelli revealed that the dream was never yours. It was designed for you, a tool of governance more than a promise of freedom. Second, Weber and Nietzsche showed how work became worship, how society turned labor into a sacred duty, draining us of joy while praising our exhaustion. Third, Schopenhauer and modern psychology reminded us that happiness was replaced by endless desire, an economy that thrives on dissatisfaction. And finally, sixth, Nietzsche and Camus guided us toward awakening that true liberation is not rejecting all dreams, but daring to create one that is authentically yours. Fifth, Jung and Kierkegaard warned that the self you are chasing is not your own, that the deepest despair is to succeed at becoming someone you never truly wanted to be. Fourth, Hobbes and Foucault revealed how freedom was exchanged for security, how fear keeps us obedient, even when the cage is velvet-lined. These 6 insights are not merely intellectual exercises, they are mirrors. Each asks you to look at your own life and see the deceptions you have quietly accepted. They are also invitations to begin dismantling the false promises and building something real in their place. The challenge, of course, is courage. It is easier to keep chasing the inherited dream than to risk inventing your own. It is easier to accept security than to embrace freedom. It is easier to perform the self society approves of than to uncover the self that waits in silence. But the world does not need more people sleepwalking through borrowed lives. It needs people willing to awaken. So what would it mean for you? Yes, you. To take this seriously. To pause and ask, what dream am I living? And whose is it? What would it mean to create a dream that no advertisement could sell me, no politician could promise me, and no system could contain? If you followed this journey all the way here, then you already sense the truth. You are not born to be a consumer of illusions, but a creator of meaning. The answer will not come all at once. It will come slowly, through reflection, through risk, through listening to the deeper voice within you. And yet, every act of authenticity, every refusal to bow to a false promise, every moment you choose creation over consumption, these are steps toward awakening. And so I leave you with a simple invitation. Begin today. Question what you were taught, reclaim your freedom, and write the dream that is truly yours.